good.
All right, you're
Yes.
good? Okay, so hi Rose.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Thank you. I'm also good. Thank you. How old are you?
27. I'm 27 years old, much to my memory problems. Yes.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born in a place called Maidstone in Kent, which is in the south of England, and lived there until I was 11 in a couple of different houses. And then my parents we moved as a family to Switzerland, to Basel, and I was there for 3 years, so aged 11 or 12 until I was 15. And then my dad got a different job, so we relocated to Belgium, and my parents have been in for 12 years, and then in that 12 years, almost 13 years, I've been all over the place. So when you say where did I grow up? Yeah, like all over, but I often say I'm from London because my adult years, kind of once I'd left home and established myself as an adult, I was living in London until I moved back here.
How would you describe the relationship you had with your parents?
It's funny because I have what I would say is like not a typical family life at all. I mean, every family has its problems, every family has its secrets, but both my parents have autism. I'm diagnosed as autistic, and so that's already quite an interesting dynamic. But my mom is a wheelchair user, and she has always had health problems since I was a child, and I've got my own health problems because it's all genetic, thank you. But we are an extremely open, liberal, very, 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 very close kind of trio. I don't think a day goes by that we don't WhatsApp, but I am very aware that the relationship I have with my parents is not like my peers. When I say we're open with each other, we are significantly open. There are really there are no no's in my family. So I'm extremely lucky. I have a lot of support and a lot of love. There's a lot of love. I think my parents taught me, my parents are the only people I've ever understood unconditional love from. But in a sense, it's never really unconditional from your parents, because I'm sure there are things that if I'd done, my parents would have struggled to love me as much. But yeah, I haven't always had, but I have a really close bond with my parents. But I think it's taken me until very recently to have that bond with them.
How would you describe your childhood, like your non-adulthood?
Well, I find that hard. When someone says childhood, I'm always kind of in a sticky situation of thinking about what is a childhood? Like, is that until you're a woman, like until you get your period? Is that until you get a job? Like,
no, until you lived, till the day you no longer lived with your parents, like till the day you...
So I was 15.
Yeah, so let's just look at that period.
Aside from the fact that I experienced sexual abuse from a very, very young age, but I had not come out to anyone about it. So I was already a very traumatized and internally angry child who got into drugs and smoking and alcohol very young. I was running away from home all the time. I was stealing. I was just the nightmare of a child you don't want to have to parent, who got kicked out of school. I take pride in the fact that I was always considered a sweet, caring, very affectionate child to a certain extent. But if there was a rule, I wasn't going to follow that rule. And it wasn't because the issue was I was never purposely being delinquent. I wasn't like the child that's like, oh, that's going to upset someone, so I'm going to do it. I don't understand why these rules exist, so I ain't going to do them. This drug makes me feel better about my life. This bottle of wine makes me forget. Not coming home for 2 days makes me feel safe. So I was doing all those things completely selfishly unaware of what it was doing to my poor parents. So my childhood certainly wasn't sunshines and rainbows, but it was all within, whilst I was having my period of time being awful, it was in a safety bubble. So it's not the same as someone who had a turbulent childhood and didn't have support. That's the weird part, is that I had two very forgiving very lost parents who just wanted me to turn out good. But I also have very broken education in my childhood, because not only did we move around a lot and that was very confusing for my schooling, I just didn't really like school, so I just never went. And teachers didn't like me, so I was never really the teacher's pet, quite the opposite. So I kind of have all the stereotypical breakdowns in my childhood that kind of telltale signs of escapism, and I was not happy. I was definitely not a happy kid at all. I would not describe that little girl as happy.
Do you think you were not happy or described as not happy from a young age, or when you
Angry. I was always seen as the angry kid. But the problem is, especially back in the day, my behaviour just came across as naughty. No one saw that I was upset, no one saw that I was unhappy. However, I was a depressed child. I was put on medication very young by a doctor who thought he knew better
How old
than
were
my
you?
mum. So I was on Prozac when I was 11. And then there was Ritalin at some point. And I first tried to kill myself when I was 11. My mum will tell you I was 10. I'm sure I was 11 because it was around the time before my grandma passed. So I took my first overdose when I was very young, and I left a note that my parents did not find. They don't know about, but they will now. But I was taken to hospital, and it was at that point that people must have thought to themselves, well, she must be really unhappy, because as much as I was showing that I wasn't very happy, I think it's very difficult to interpret children, because I was still enjoying things, I was still playing with my games, I was still integrating, I don't think I was vocalizing that I was being bullied, or that I was hated at school, or that I was unhappy. I don't think I knew how to communicate that. And the only way was, I guess, that first suicide attempt.
And when you say you were described as a troubled child, how old were you? Because you said you got into drugs and wine and substances. So
well, actually, one of the weird things that came up in my childhood was I had a very, I guess from my abuse, had a very abnormal understanding of sexual pleasure from a very young age. So when I was in primary school, so I think you're around, it's between the age of 4 and 8, I think. Please God, let me figure out.
I don't know, it's different in every country.
Yeah,
so
I was young, and I was in primary school, so I was very, very young, pre-10. And our teacher made me hold bowls during classes because I would touch myself during class. And I was always taught, that's wrong and kids shouldn't be touching themselves. But in fact, fuck that, because it's very normal for children to notice that something is pleasurable and want to repeat it. And I just happened to find that out real young because it had been shown to me already. But instead of seeing that as a behavior that maybe wasn't a classic example of a normal kid, it was seen as naughty and covered, and so no one looked at that like, what's going on with her? Instead it was, Rose is at it again, let's embarrass her in front of the whole class. So I know that I was seen as troubled from a very, very young age, but not in a way that was caring, not in a way that was, what's wrong with her? Why is she acting this way? It was more, she's naughty.
And there is something wrong with her, not what is wrong with her. You say you were sexually troubled. Do you think that is a part of abuse in your younger years? Or how do you look at the abuse you've been through?
I always kind of rationalize it for myself just to find some sort of peace in my life by telling myself that we always say that kids are not sexual beings, they're young, they're innocent, they don't know better. Kids walk in on their parents having sex all the time. We underestimate children and what they're exposed to, and whether they found mommy's phone and they saw something on it, whether they walked in on dad watching porn, whether their older brother was watching porn. We don't know what kids are exposed to. We don't have them 24/7 in CCTV. So I take peace in the idea that everything that happened to me as a child was not as abnormal as we're made to think it was. And I guess because I was so young, from my recollection, so young when I was introduced to being touched inappropriately or seeing things I maybe shouldn't have seen, aka porn, or phallic drawings on playgrounds, or just anything really that we think we protect children from. I don't think that at the age of 4 I was completely oblivious. And I don't know if it's just because I've been touched at a young age, or if it was because kids are just not as dumb as we like to think they are. So that's just kind of how I rationalize it. I find peace in the fact that I was maybe hyperactively sexual, and I still am, because it just was a part of everything for me. It was just so normal.
How you said you also have chronic illnesses in the start of this interview. Could you describe them?
Yeah, so...
Because your parents are also autistic and have some illnesses.
Yeah,
I don't like to use the word illness again, but yeah.
So, first and foremost, when I was a baby, my mom was very poorly, and she had ME, and she didn't have very many diagnoses yet, so she was suffering and she didn't have the answers. And then throughout my childhood, we started getting diagnosed with things, and I think first for me was I was diagnosed with Addison's disease. And Addison's disease is actually, and my boyfriend will tell you that I downplay this way too much. Addison's disease is an extremely dangerous, life-threatening disease, but only if not well medicated. I take a corticosteroid every time something stressful happens to my body. I have to take my morning and my afternoon dose to survive, without which I would die. Yes, it's a little bit more serious than just popping a pill, but when for example, if I go out all night and party, I have to take a lot of medication the next day, otherwise my body just goes, nope, can't cope with it. It's, Addison's disease is an adrenal insufficiency disorder. It is something that you can either be born with, or something that you develop by trashing your adrenals, aka drinking Red Bull all day long.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was a genetic problem. So there was that, and because I was sick, and I was a very sick kid, I had hospital admissions from being a baby. I was premature. I got chickenpox very young. I had full milk rejection, so I couldn't drink cow's milk, breast milk, goat's milk, or any milk. I went on to develop thyroid problems, so I'm hypothyroid, so my body wasn't producing enough thyroid, which is the hormone. And because of the Addison's and the thyroid problem, there was kind of a jungle of things that arise as you go on. We consider myself to be autoimmune because the way that those conditions affect your body is you're just super vulnerable to everything. And the other thing with Addison's disease is if you and I eat the same meal, or 10 people eat the same meal, 9 of those people can be fine, but I'll go and sit on the toilet all night with diarrhea and have food poisoning, and then I'll be hospitalized because it's killing me, because my body absolutely cannot handle a food bug or a stomach bug with a stomach flu. So I grew up in and out of hospital. It obviously had a very heavy effect on my body. The other condition that runs in my family is something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and there's about 3 or 4 types of that. I have something called HEDS, which is a hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So my joints go way further than they should. My skin was very stretchy growing up before I became a smoker. It's not about your bones necessarily. For some type of EDS people, it can be so serious that they just move their neck and they dislocate. I have micro dislocations, so my shoulders and my hips often do a nice little pop and it hurts, and then they go back where they should. Yeah. But the thing that is very difficult about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is it seems to be, people perceive it as a deteriorative disease because of the way your body starts to get worse over time. We don't call it deteriorative because it's always there. It's a congenital disorder. It affects the collagen in your body. I used to have really perky boobs, and now my boobs are like near my knees, and I hate it. And I'm 27 and I have really saggy boobs. But it's a lack of collagen production, and it's the mixture between the dangers of I've had multiple breaks in my tendons and my ligaments, and all the minor parts of your body, not your bones, which require a lot of recovery. And that's the other thing, Ehlers-Danlos affects your recovery time. So if I had an Addison's crisis, which would have put me in hospital and potentially kill me, the impact of the violent vomiting, the way it affects the body, it's a chronic illness, so it makes you immensely tired. You are in chronic pain all the time. People I know who have Ehlers-Danlos that are not as lucky as I am in some sense, they're on morphine all day long just to survive. I have taken strong painkillers on and off for the last 3 years because I have got to the point where the pain is unbearable. But it's just a process of your body being very fragile. And it being complete, it's an invisible illness. So I have this whole mixture of illnesses that don't sit well together, and my mom has a lot of illnesses, but I am kind of the sickest one. And then my dad has his own set of health issues, but those are a little bit more self-inflicted. My mom now uses a wheelchair permanently, and that's kind of, we joke about it, that's kind of my future. I am very active for someone of my position, but I am completely bypassing the inevitable. So I am very much doing what my mum did, which was my age, which was not wanting to take any aids or help until you really have to, because you hold on to, but when I was younger I could do flips and I could cartwheel and I could hold down a full-time job and I could last all day without needing sleep, and it's something that you struggle with the older you get. And it's not that you're deteriorating, it's that you're just getting older and these things are inevitable. So yeah.
So how do you feel right now? Do you think a wheelchair is something inevitable, or how do you feel right now? Are you very sick right now, or?
I'm actually going through a period of like the last maybe 3 months. The cruel thing about my disease is, like I say, you get this like wave. So like a lot of people I know from the community of people with my disease, like my mom, one of my friends, can't remember, they've been in the same position as me. Like my mom and a friend of mine were both dancers when they were younger, not knowing they had EDS. And I danced as a child, I did lots of things, I was sporty, I'm a personal trainer. But the difficulty is you get shown what you can do, and then your body goes, no, can't do it anymore, like we're shutting down. And then sometimes you get a resurrection. So what happened to me was a few years ago, I got very sick and I really thought that was it. I started using a crutch when I walked. I used a wheelchair for long distances. I couldn't really do very much for myself. I wasn't working full time. I just felt like utter crap all the time. And then I got a rise. And then the last year, I've shocked people. And I lost a lot of weight and I got really fit and I was running, cycling, swimming, gymming, traveling, whatever I wanted. Obviously people don't know the truth behind it. It affects everything. Like Ehlers-Danlos affects your bowels and your heart and your lungs and just fucking everything. So there's so much more to that picture, and I know my reality, and I know what things have changed in my body and what the level of which pain I'm at, and whether I can do things as much as before. And because it's invisible, and because I am able to do certain things, and I do still dance and I do still train, other people see and perceive me as oh, you do all these things, so you know you can work full time or whatever. For me, I'm hyper aware of the fact that I'm losing more and more things in my life. I'm having to have more and more rest, and it has hit me like a brick to the face the last few months that I have had to cut down my life so significantly that I'm even more aware of where it's heading. And the cruelty of it is that I will just one day wake up and have to accept mobility aids and stop protecting them. So it is inevitable, it's just I'm going to keep pushing it away as long as I can.
Yeah, of course. So you have described your childhood and you moved out with your parents at a very young age. Mm-hmm. You moved out when you were 15.
I went to boarding school.
Oh, you went to boarding school. How did life go on from that point? Did things get better for you, or how would you describe it?
I would say my life only started living about 2 years ago. Anything before that, I don't even have the best memory of it, because I have incredibly good support now, and I have the right friends, and I have a healthy relationship, and I have a very supportive and incredibly clever therapist. I didn't have those things before, and I was not aware of who I was, and I don't think I was even living in my own mind. I think I was just surviving. So for me, from the time in which I went to boarding school, and I wasn't at home all the time, and after boarding school, I lived here a little bit, and then I moved to Bath, and I lived in 3 or 4 different places in a year. And then once I went to uni and I went to London, and I lived independently in London, I think from the age of about 18, I was very, very different to people around me, because I was off doing my thing in other countries and I wasn't living at home with my parents. It's taken me until I was like 25 to actually know what the hell I'm doing with myself, which I truly believe is quite normal, but we only realise it when we get old.
Yeah, you've been through a lot of shitty things. And what were breaking points for you in your life? Like things that really, or people who really like shut you down, like really like dragged you through mud and through hell.
When I was at uni, I had just recovered from my first ACL surgery.
What's that?
There's a major ligament in your knee, and I had completely torn it in half. It's a footballer's injury or a skier's injury, but unfortunately very common with my disease. And I had done such a number on it that it had completely ruined my summer. I had to come back from America, and I went through very heavy recovery. I was racing the clock because I wanted to complete my university degree back in the UK. My mum and my physios nursed me back to being able to walk again, and I went off to university a little bit late. And I went into my second year, and I took on a lot of responsibility. I had a few jobs. I was studying. I was living in a flat with first years, and I was their responsible person, and there was a hell of a lot of bad stuff going on, and I wasn't coping, and I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating well, I was drinking way too much, and I got very mentally unwell, and I did not cope with the limitations of my leg. I was still going through recovery. I wasn't me, but I'm not really sure why I say that, because I'm not sure if I ever was before. And this all snowballed into a very rapid decline in my mental health, and I wasn't getting any help. The doctor didn't listen to me. I had called places that were designed for mentally ill people. I didn't get any help or support. I was just offered medications, and I crashed and burned, and I took nearly 100 pills and drank myself to sleep. And if it wasn't for my best friend, I wouldn't be here now. And I successfully, in a sense, killed myself for 4 minutes, and then was revived. And I did not have that moment when I woke up where I was like, oh, I'm so lucky to be alive. I had that moment where I woke up and I was fucking angry that I didn't successfully hurt myself. And I was in a hospital bed, and there was somebody at the bottom of my bed watching me so I didn't kill myself again. And I was...
How old were you?
21?
Yeah.
I think. Young. And...
Back home at London.
This is in London, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to go back to uni with everyone knowing, because what happened was a nurse that day said to me, you need to take your mask off. You need to stop faking that you're okay. And it just hit me. And so that day in that hospital bed, I started my first ever blog. And the first blog piece I ever wrote was called The Day After I Died. And I put it out on everything. I didn't even think twice, I didn't read it back. I went back to a friend who was taking care of me. I went back to her house. I kept staring in on me to make sure I wasn't hurting myself. And I put this blog out on Facebook, Instagram, Google,
like a little, like almost.
I was holding myself responsible.
You put it out on all your socials, and like a little, like text actually, like.
It was on WordPress.
What? Oh yeah.
So it was a proper blog. You had to click on it.
A link to a blog, yeah.
And in the first day, it got 3,000 views. And I got a lot of messages. I didn't read them at first, obviously, I wasn't very well. My parents flew into the UK that day. Obviously, they got a 3 a.m. call from my best friend who was trying not to be honest and not scare them, even though they were telling her that I was flatlining. And she called my parents and she said, your daughter's in hospital. She took an overdose. And I remember before my parents flew in, I had woken up in the hospital. And side note, because of my Addison's disease, I then started having an Addison's crisis, but because I was on suicide watch, they didn't believe me, so they weren't giving me my medication, they thought I was a drug addict. So I started having an Addison's crisis, so I crawled to the toilet, because at this point my body was shutting down. And I texted my dad and I said, I wanted to kill myself, but this is not the way I wanted to die. I'm not going out by my disease. So he called the hospital, and then they said, come to the they told me to come from my hospital bed. This is a whole other story I can tell you. From the hospital bed to the desk to speak to your father. So I crawl to the phone, I take the phone, and my dad says, did you really take that many? It's the first thing he said to me. And it's just a moment that has stuck with me, because that feeling of hearing my dad's voice break made me feel so bad, because I was like, the thing is, I was turning to everyone, but I didn't turn to them. I didn't call them and say, I'm on the verge of killing myself. I just did not communicate that, because in those moments you can't, you're so irrational. But I've held on to that moment for the last 6 years, because no matter how low I have gotten, and trust me, the last 6 years have been turbulent, and I've been on and off medications, and I've been through psychiatric care, and I have not been well many a time. I've always said I will never get that low again. I just won't. I don't ever want to go through going back to uni and having to go to these meetings every week with people who I was like, I'm not as mentally unwell as you. And they were talking about medications that would put them to sleep instantly, and injections and being sectioned. And I remember just thinking, fuck, I'm not. Am I this unwell? So it was very poignant to me in my life to feel more sane than the people I was paired with, and realizing I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want to be so disillusioned with life. But I've had many moments like that, but that one kind of carries to all the other moments in my life where I was mentally unstable. And I mean, I was in psychiatric care only a few years ago, and I was on medications, and I was significantly unwell. But I look back on those moments, and you know what, during the last 2 years, we've been so tested as humans, and there have been plenty of times where my mental health has taken a massive landslide, but I just never get that low anymore, because I can feel how I felt in those moments. So I know they really stand out to me.
Yeah, so you can always like grab these moments and then take what you learned in the other moments in your past and like use it for now, for things you have to deal with now.
Yeah.
And that's amazing that you actually take what you learn and use it. You have been a massive inspiration to Instagram in the last years.
Just by being me.
Yeah, and you've done, you know, you've made people uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You've also sterilized yourself at a very young age.
Yeah. So I was 23, and after about, oh my god, basically my whole life fighting for that one. After years and years and years of them trying to put contraceptive pills down my mouth, I just kept pushing, and I just wouldn't take no for an answer. And I made a nurse cry, and I said, "You'll put silicone in my boobs, you'll let me have an abortion, you'll do whatever the hell you want, but you won't sterilize me." And I just found that incredible, and I wasn't having it. I don't have the same opinion of sterilization that other women hold. And I think each to their own, and you can have 5 babies and then I don't have to have any. So I never wanted kids. I have not regretted it for a second in the last 4 years. And it was actually the best decision I've ever made for myself. I am so happy to be sterilized, but that came with me because I was published in a famous newspaper talking about it. I fell under a lot of scrutiny, and I expected that, and I'm quite thick-skinned, and I knew that there would be a lot of mums coming at me, a lot of hate coming at me, and there was, but I just see that as a small mind, and I don't care, because it's my life, and I don't think about them when I'm able to have unprotected sex with my boyfriend and not get pregnant. It's just that simple to me. I think society has a very odd view on women's rights.
When did you know you wanted to get sterilized? When did you know you did not want?
I knew it existed. As children, we're not told that. I knew that men could get their penises snipped. I knew that, But I did not know that as a woman I could have my fallopian tubes tied or snipped or whatever other options you have to become sterile. I knew that being sterile was seen as a negative. So when I was growing up, in movies when they were like, she's sterile, it was like, oh God, she can't have kids. And so that's all I knew of it. That was, you were born with the incapacity to hold it, to create a child. So I was just told that was a massive negative. It wasn't until at some point, someone mentioned to me that sterilisation was an article I read that said sterilisation was one of the known methods for assisting PMDD, which is an extreme version of PMS and something I suffer with. And I just kind of went, why not? Like, tie my tubes, snip them, I'll be super happy. Stop giving me contraceptive pills that make me sick. And I got offered everything. I got offered the IUD, the fork, the fucking every pill under the sun, the pull-out method, the follow your cycle method, whatever. But no one mentioned to me sterilisation because as a woman I have a uterus and it's a home for a baby. And I just got so angry because I was like, well, I don't really like kids. Like, I like my friends' kids, but that's about it. I don't want one. I could barely take care of myself. I'm selfish. I want my money for myself. And I was like, why am I being in a position where I can't admit those things without someone saying it out loud?
You were put in a position where they would rather have you bear a child into this world where you knew you would not take proper care of than not have any children and save a child damage.
Yeah, the world is populated enough. We don't need every woman to have a child.
So I think that's amazing how you really like put yourself out, and not just in that situation. Actually, you are amazingly vocal and social.
Yes, I'm loud.
Is that something you've always had?
So I now describe myself as a hyperactive introvert, meaning I'm actually a big introvert and I need a hell of a lot of time on my own and I need a hell of a lot of quiet. But I'm also very social. I'm a hurricane at parties and I am a social butterfly and I need to know everyone and I want to know everyone's stories and I want to see everyone's eyesight. But growing up I was taught that being chatty was wrong and I was in a lot of trouble for being too talkative, too passionate, too loud, too everything. Too was such a word in my childhood. So growing up I was always made to believe that me being this loud and this vocal and this outspoken was a curse and it was a bad thing until I got social media where it was in my control and it was like, if you don't want to hear me, unfollow me. I had that platform to be completely and honestly myself and write whatever I wanted and no one could tell me not to, and if they did, block. If you ask anyone from my previous life, as I like to call it, on my Instagram it says life 2.0. And only a few people have picked up on that and asked me, why did you write that? And I'm like, because I think I restarted my life at some point and I spent a lot of my life thinking that was impossible. But now I'm going through a phase of having a loving boyfriend who says to me that one of the things he loves about me is I don't shut up, that I'm so vocal and opinionated, and that we live in a world where a female speaking out is so oppressed. And I'm just there going, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So I think as much as social media can be a damaging place, it can also be somewhere that you finally have that platform, and I have always been loud and vocal, to answer your first question, but I have never had the ability to do it comfortably.
Is it something that encourages you? Because you are you are put in a place to be uncomfortable, so you just like put it out there to
so challenging myself.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think people are very scared to confront their inner thoughts. I often write a blog piece and I read it back and I'm like, I didn't write that. Like, I get so mind blown that those words came out of my mind. And if I could not do that, then I probably would not make the progress that I'm making. So it has become almost a necessity for my progress, for my therapy. It is therapy. Like, I don't really care if no one agrees with me, but it's nice when they do. I put it out there. And it's like the universe holds me responsible for the words I've just spoken. And I can't take it back. I can delete it, but it's done. And I tend not to delete my big posts because those were my words and that's how I felt when I wrote it, regardless of how I might feel later on about it.
it's okay to change your mind or point of view of a situation, if that's what you're trying to get at right now. Amazing. What is something that, if you look back at your life right now, what is something that has helped you through the roughest parts? What is something you held on to get through?
Well, the funny thing is, people used to ask me, are you not scared of death? And I used to say, I'm scared of life. I always said I was not scared of death because I knew what that meant. I was scared of life. I did not like thinking about the future. I didn't want a future. I was that person who, the only one in one of my courses who stood on the left side of the room when they said, people on the right, stand there if you want to live past the age of 50. People on the left, stand there if you want to live to the age of 50. And I was the only one that stood on the left side of the room. Because I did not have the ability to think positively of having to live a long time. I don't want to get old, I don't want to get wrinkly. But at some point in the last few years, I started actually being kind of happy and saying, weirdly, I'm happy. I want to see where my life goes. And that was a point where that was the only point I started having something I really clung on to, and that was quite meaningful to me, because before that, I always felt like I was living because I was being told to. I was very angry. I wrote blog pieces that was angry at my parents, my family, my friends. I called them selfish. I hated them for making me live when I didn't fucking want to. I remember sitting in a psychiatric hospital and basically accusing my mom of making me live, which I feel very bad about. And I remember my mom getting so desperate and so painfully hurt seeing the way I was suffering that she even listened to me when I talked of things like euthanasia, because she was desperate, because she was so used to hearing me angry that I had come to the age of whatever I was, 20-something, and I still didn't want to be here. I can imagine that was very grating on them. But at some point that changed, and now I hold on to the fact that I felt that way, that I used to think that life was completely purposeless, and that I was angry that I had to be here. And now I don't feel that way. So it's weird. I think there's only really that one thing I cling on to is now I'm like, okay, now I want to know why did I stay? Why did I get through it? What kept me on this earth during those moments? Because clearly it is something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, you've been through, it's really weird to say that, but you've been through the worst things. And like almost all the worst things a person can go through. You've been sexually abused and, I'm sorry to say this, but raped at a young age. How old were you when you were first raped?
Well, this is the thing. So the sexual abuse I experienced as a child is sadly not the only sexual abuse I've ever experienced, which is quite common with, I would say victims, but I say survivors of sexual abuse. You often end up in a lot of positions in your life where you end up abused by other people. I don't know, maybe I was vulnerable or naive or whatever, but I was very trusting. So the first time that the sexual abuse happened as a child, I think I was about 11. That was the kind of in-house sexual abuse. And then throughout my life, I have been abused or raped or manhandled sexually by quite a few people. Not just men either, so it's both genders. I'm not being gender specific here. So I have a history, which I hate to say, I have a history of rape, which is why I'm one of those people where someone says that word to me out of context, I find very uncomfortable, because I'm like, you don't know what that word means. The context in which you're using it is the only time I do use it. So the first time I was about 11, and then there are plenty more other circumstances outside of that situation, with people I trusted, and sometimes people I didn't know, just situations I got into.
Is it hard for you to enjoy sex or intimacy sometimes?
Yes and no. I am with someone who is so patient with me and who listens and who treasures my body in a way that I've never had. I mean, my boyfriend makes me feel so loved in a way that I didn't think he could do sexually. And he sees me, and I said it to him that we had a moment during a trip where I got very emotional and I cried and I felt like I lost my virginity for the first time, and I'm so embarrassed to admit that, but it's true. And I was so shy and I felt so ashamed that I was 27 and I was having this feeling, but it's just because no one had ever made me feel the way that he made me feel in that moment. It's so seen and so enriched by our moment, and I guess it was like coming to an age where when someone used to say to me, make love, I used to shiver and I used to be like, it's not that, like you're fucking, you're having sex. But it really is a thing, and it's that feeling of like, just knowing that you're safe that I have never had. And I say that, but there is a darker side to it. There is a lot of trauma in my life, and stuff arises because I'm intimate. When I was single and I was avoiding sex, unless I was wankered, drunk, I wasn't being touched, so I didn't have to deal with it. But when I first started seeing him, I had a lot of significant panic attacks. I had a lot of bad dreams. I still do. I've had nightmares my whole life about my sexual abuse. And he had to be very patient with me, because it could just be in the sex moment or after or before, or I wouldn't want to have sex for ages because I have these things going on in my head, because seeing a penis is hard when you've been abused, because being touched is difficult.
Did you see sex as a non-love act?
No, that's something I was always fortunate with. I felt love during sex with people, but I was not aware that that wasn't love. How they were treating me sexually was disrespectful, knowing the things they knew about me. They should never have treated me the way they did in bed, knowing the things they knew about me, but I normalized it. So I thought that was love. And now I know, now that I'm in this relationship, completely different world.
Almost 17 years later, because your virginity was absolutely took. Your virginity was stolen because you were raped when you lost your virginity.
Mm-hmm. And my first consensual time was absolute hell as well, so I don't really have positive memories of it. However, I did get an apology about 8 years later after my first consensual time for that way that he handled it, so no.
Would you say that only now you've learned to enjoy sex? Or learned...
I think it's so weird, because it's almost like I don't want to put down previous sexual partners where I'm sure I enjoyed the sex, I'm sure they enjoyed the sex, and I don't want anyone to ever feel offended, but they have to also respect that I wasn't therapized at that point and I didn't understand myself. So as much as I thought I was enjoying the sex, I was not present. It's so different now that I've had therapy and I'm such a different person. And I'm a different person in bed. I'm making noises I didn't know existed. I'm adventuring in ways that, like, I've always been. Everybody knows this about me. I've always been sexually adventurous. That's no word of a lie. I've always had toys and I've always been open to things, and I've never hidden sex from my friends. I see no reason not to. I think it's great talking about sex with people, but I just wasn't... I mean, I spent so long of my life sexually confused, and I thought I was asexual for a while, and I thought I was fluid, gay, straight, whatever. I kept putting labels on things because I didn't understand my sexual trauma, whereas now I say to people, I'm not gay, I'm not straight, I just love him. I just want to have sex with him. And I don't care what anyone says about that or their theories on sex. I only want to be touched by him because he's earned that trust that nobody in my entire life ever got. And it's not that people didn't try. It's not that I haven't had nice sexual men in my life. I've had women treat me great, I've had men treat me great. Like, it's not about their gender. The issue is I assign my trauma to men because it's been men. And it took a long time for me to let that go with my partner, because he's a man, because he has a penis, because he touches me the way a man touches a woman, because he is a man's man, and he identifies as a man, and that's so hard on my trauma. But
still?
I think it always will be, in a sense. I think as much as I can put all this hard work into becoming comfortable with who I am and my past, I'm not sure if I ever won't flinch when I'm touched. I'm not sure if I ever won't. He's very intuitive. He reads my body very well, and he knows that I'm never just going to be that person that's like, rip my clothes off now. Sex between us has a process, and it's that process of making me feel comfortable in the room, comfortable to take my clothes off, safe that he's touching me, and that's fine for him. It's the fact that he takes the time to do that, and he just has a process when we have sex. It doesn't ruin spontaneity. It doesn't ruin how incredibly good it is. It doesn't ruin the adventurous side of it. It just means that I am actually there because I have felt him do those steps. So I don't think that will ever relax. I don't think I'll ever be rid of it, but I do think I have less nightmares. I'm scared of him less. I flinch less. I want to touch him more. I'm opening up again. And God help us if we ever break up. He's stuck with me now. But yeah, I don't like to give false hope to people and say that I think that you get cured. I don't think you do. I think you just survive, and I think you just find ways around it, and you find a partner that is willing to give you that time of day, to make you feel good sexually, and that's how it should fucking be. To him, he's not going to enjoy it if I'm not happy or comfortable, and that is exactly how it should be. But keep in mind, I was only 22 when I found out that sex wasn't over when he finished. I was 22 years old when a friend of mine's sister said to me on a beach, but hold on, sex isn't over just because the guy finished. And I sat up and was completely mind blown, because that's what I was raised to think, not by my parents, but just by my environment. So I think the fact that I just didn't know better, because it's what you see in the films. He finishes, he rolls over, and they go to sleep. That's just how sex was to me, and that's how I had been treated. It wasn't like the guy was checking that she had a good time. It was, he thought he'd done a good job, he's finished, he goes to sleep. So a lot has changed for me sexually over the years, just by opening up about it, and just by realizing how much my trauma was affecting that for me.
But what is the definition of being a woman for you or to you? There is no wrong answer, but
for me, it's kind of an interesting question, because I'm going through something very much with my own body as a woman at the moment. Because I'm sterilized, people look down on me as a woman, because there's a role as a woman in society, and I've always sat on the side of that. But at the moment, my femaleness, my womanhood, stems from how I feel within myself. I feel powerful if I turn things around, if I say to myself, being a woman is hard, but I know a way around this. And my therapist is currently doing a process of teaching me not to gender specify. So instead of saying he does that because he's a man, I say they do that because they're a human. So I'm doing it with myself, and I'm trying to see things. It's not because I'm a woman, it's because I'm a person. So I'm struggling with my own identity as a woman. But I think if you'd asked me that question before, I would have said, back when I was full of hate towards men, I would have said we were superior. Because I just hated anything that wasn't female. I was obsessed with everything that we class as female. Womanhood for me was like periods and pink and being a female boss, and like just that women are such strong figures, and they can pump something out of their vagina, and they put up with men's crap all the time, and they build empires without even saying they're doing it. So power is just a word that resounds so much in my head when I think of women, but I didn't feel that way until I started feeling powerful again. It's an interesting question. I wonder how other people answer that.
Yeah, but this is an interesting interview because you're an open person, and I definitely want to talk about more things if you're
anytime.
If you're up for it. So this has been mind-blowing, and I think it's not just me who thinks this way.
I'm used to seeing people's faces. A lot of people have actually questioned the authenticity of my life, because when you hear, and I think this is 5% of my life I've given you today, when you hear my whole life story, I'm like, can that really all happen in just 27 years? But yeah, and a lot of that stuff happened before I was even 22, and it's mad, and I keep saying I'm gonna write a book about my life one day, but
you should.
Oh gosh,
I will buy every single
There's
copy.
not enough trees.
There's not enough trees.
There's not enough trees. I'll write.
It's amazing. I just wanted to thank you for being here today, for being you, for being open, for being again open to talk about everything, because this is actually so normal, and it's sad to say. I'm sad to say this, but this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's reality for
sadly normal.
Yeah, it's sadly normal. This is the sad reality of 80% of women.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So
And it's about, I think, normalizing the conversation might have an effect on the original crime.
yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Really, thank you so much for doing this, for everything.